He thought their love was unbreakable, a bond forged in morning walks and evening cuddles, sealed with the unwavering loyalty only a dog can offer. Mark Reynolds lived for Max, his magnificent golden retriever, a furry shadow that filled his small North Carolina apartment with joy and shed hair in equal measure. Then came Sarah, captivating and clever, stealing Mark's heart, but harboring a quiet disdain for the canine companion who had always been his number one. When duty called, Mark overseas, he entrusted his whole world, Max included, to the woman he'd hastily married. He returned months later to an empty leash, a fabricated story, and a chasm of heartbreak. But hope flickers in the most unexpected places, like the sterile hallway of an animal shelter, where a desperate search for a new friend could lead to the reunion he never dared dream of, and ignite a quest for justice against the woman who shattered his trust and abandoned his best friend. Mark Reynolds wasn't sure when Max had ceased being just a dog and become, well, everything. Maybe it was during those first few chaotic puppy months, navigating shredded slippers and midnight potty breaks in his modest Fayetteville apartment. Mark, a sergeant in the 82nd Airborne Division stationed at nearby Fort Bragg, had always wanted a dog. He'd grown up with labs and beagles, but the moment he saw the 8-week-old golden retriever tumble over his own paws at the breeders, a goofy grin plastered on his furry face, Mark was smitten. He named him Max, short for Maximus, because, even then, Mark sensed a certain noble goofiness about him. Their life fell into a comfortable rhythm dictated by Army schedules and Max's needs. Early mornings started not with an alarm clock, but with a cold, wet nose nudging Mark's hand, followed by the insistent thump-thump-thump of Max's tail against the bedroom floor. Walks were adventures, exploring the trails around Carver's Creek or playing fetch until Mark's arm ached at the local dog park. Max was a furry ambassador, charming neighbors and fellow soldiers alike with his perpetually optimistic demeanor and soft brown eyes that seemed to understand every word, Mark said. Evenings were for shared meals, kibble for Max, whatever Mark had managed to cook for himself, followed by couch time. Max, despite his size, firmly believed he was a lapdog, often settling his 70-pound frame across Mark's legs, emitting contented sighs as Mark scrolled through emails or watched television. The low rumble of Max's snores was the soundtrack to Mark's quiet nights. Max was his confidant after tough training days, his welcome committee after long field exercises, his furry, four-legged reason to smile. Always. He was family. Mark had spent easily over $2,000 in the first year alone on vet visits, quality food, toys, bedding, and training classes. An investment he never regretted for a second. Max had a microchip, religiously updated vaccinations, and the best damn dog bed money could buy. Then, Sarah Jenkins entered his life. They met at a trendy coffee shop downtown. Sarah was sharp, witty, a marketing coordinator with an infectious laugh and eyes that sparkled. Mark, usually reserved, found himself drawn to her confidence and quick smile. She was everything his solitary dog-centric life wasn't: sophisticated, socially adept, and initially, seemingly understanding of his commitment to Max. "He's big," she'd said during their first meeting at Mark's apartment, standing tentatively in the doorway as Max bounded forward, tail wagging furiously, eager to greet the newcomer. Sarah offered a hesitant hand, petting Max awkwardly on the head, before quickly withdrawing it. "And he sheds, doesn't he?" Occupational hazard of owning the best dog in the world, Mark had laughed, ruffling Max's thick golden fur. Sarah preferred her cat, Mittens, a sleek, aloof Siamese who regarded Max with undisguised contempt from the safety of Sarah's pristine, pet hair-free apartment. When Mark stayed over, Max remained at home, a fact that pricked at Mark's conscience but seemed necessary to maintain the peace. Sarah often commented on the dog smell in Mark's apartment, the stray hairs on his clothes, the muddy paw prints near the door after a rainy walk. "Couldn't he, stay outside more?" she suggested once. Mark bristled. He's an inside dog, Sarah. He's part of the family. Right, she'd murmured, unconvinced, turning her attention back to her phone. Mark, blinded by burgeoning love, dismissed these as minor points of friction, bumps in the road that they would smooth out. He loved Sarah, truly believed he did. He envisioned a future, a house, maybe kids. And Max, of course. Max would be there, growing old alongside them. He convinced himself Sarah would come around, that she just needed time to appreciate Max's wonderful nature. He loved her ambition, her style, the way she challenged him. He just wished she loved his dog, or even liked him. The deployment orders came suddenly, as they often did in the military. A 9-month rotation to Afghanistan. The news hit Mark hard, the primary pang of anxiety centering not on the danger zone he was heading into, but on Max. Who would care for him? His parents lived states away, and his army buddies had their own demanding schedules and deployments. Sarah offered the solution, almost too readily. I'll take care of him, Mark. Of course I will. We can move him into my place while you're gone. Relief washed over Mark, immense and gratitude-filled. But a flicker of unease remained. Sarah's apartment was smaller and decidedly not dog-proofed, and then there was Mittens. Are you sure, Sarah? It's a huge commitment. He needs walks, attention, and Mittens. We'll make it work, she insisted, squeezing his hand. Don't you worry about a thing. Focus on staying safe. A week before his departure, spurred by a potent cocktail of love, fear, and perhaps a desire to solidify Sarah's commitment, Mark proposed. Sarah accepted immediately, tears sparkling in her eyes. They had a quick courthouse wedding, a simple affair with a couple of Mark's army friends as witnesses. He was leaving Sergeant Mark Reynolds, husband. It felt right, secure. He was leaving his wife in charge of his dog. He spent his last days stateside meticulously preparing Sarah. He wrote down Max's feeding schedule, the vet's contact information, the number for the doggy daycare Max sometimes attended. He showed her where he kept the extra-large bags of premium dog food, easily $100 a bag, his grooming tools, his favorite indestructible chew toys. He transferred a significant amount of money, around $3,000, into their new joint account specifically earmarked for Max's care. Food, potential vet visits, emergencies. Call me whenever you can, Mark pleaded, hugging Max tightly on his last morning. The dog whined softly, sensing the tension, pressing, his body close. Be a good boy for Sarah, okay, buddy? I'll be back before you know it. Sarah stood in the doorway, smiling reassuringly. We'll be fine, honey. Send pictures. Mark kissed his wife, gave Max one last ear scratch, and walked away, trusting the two most important beings in his life to each other. He carried the image of Max's soulful brown eyes watching him leave, a silent promise hanging in the air between them. Deployment was demanding. Long patrols, tense situations, sporadic internet access. Mark lived for the brief video calls with Sarah. Initially, she seemed cheerful, sending photos of herself, of Mittens lounging in sunbeams, even a slightly forced-looking selfie with Max early on. When Mark asked specifically about Max, her answers became vague. Oh, he's fine, just sleeping, or he's out in the yard, even though Sarah's apartment didn't have a yard. Mark tried calling the doggy daycare once, just to check if Sarah was still taking him occasionally. No, we haven't seen Max in a couple of months. Sergeant Reynolds, the receptionist informed him kindly. We assumed with you deployed. A knot of unease tightened in Mark's stomach. He pressed Sarah about it during their next call. The daycare? Oh, it got too expensive, she deflected smoothly. And honestly, Mark, he was just too much energy for my apartment. But don't worry, I found a solution. What solution? Mark asked, his voice tight. A friend of mine, from work. She has a big farm out in the country. Acres and acres for him to run. She offered to take him temporarily just while you're gone. He's having a blast, honestly. Way better than being cooped up here with Mittens. It sounded plausible, almost idyllic. A farm? Max would love that. Yet, something felt off. Sarah couldn't provide the friend's name or number. Oh, she's kind of private, you know? And photos were mysteriously unavailable due to bad reception out there. Mark, thousands of miles away and embroiled in the daily stresses of a war zone, reluctantly let it go, clinging to the hope that Sarah, his wife, wouldn't lie about something so important. He pushed the nagging doubts away, focusing on completing his tour and getting home. 9 long months crawled by. Finally, Mark was on a plane heading back to the States, back to Fort Bragg, back to Fayetteville. His heart pounded with anticipation. He couldn't wait to see Sarah, but the image that truly propelled him forward was Max. That goofy, slobbery greeting, the feel of his thick fur, the unconditional love he knew awaited him. Sarah met him at the airport, radiant and smiling. They drove back to her apartment, Mark chattering excitedly, asking question after question about Max. "So, is he here now? Did your friend bring him back?" Mark asked, practically bouncing in the passenger seat as they pulled into her apartment complex. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "Well, honey, about that." They entered the apartment. It was spotless, serene. Mittens blinked disdainfully from her perch on the sofa. There was no sign of Max. No water bowl, no dog bed, no stray squeaky toy. Nothing. "Sarah, where's Max?" Mark asked, the unease returning with a vengeance, cold and sharp. Sarah took a deep breath, avoiding his eyes. "Mark, sit down." "I don't want to sit down. Where is my dog?" Her composure finally cracked. The story about the friend with the farm dissolved under Mark's increasingly frantic questioning. The truth, when it finally emerged, was uglier than anything Mark could have imagined. He was just too much, Sarah stammered, tears welling. Crocodile tears, Mark realized with sudden, chilling clarity. He shed everywhere. He smelled. Mittens hated him. He chewed one of my good shoes. I couldn't handle it, Mark. Not for 9 months. "So where is he, Sarah? Did you give him to a rescue?" "Which one?" Mark's voice was dangerously low. I took him to a shelter," she admitted, shrinking back. "About 6, maybe 7 months ago. Shortly after you left." "Which shelter, Sarah?" Mark demanded, his hands clenching into fists. "I don't remember the name. It was kind of far away. I just dropped him off. I thought someone else would adopt him quickly. He's a golden retriever." She finished lamely, as if that excused everything. Dropped him off, like a bag of trash. His Max. Confused, terrified, abandoned in a strange, loud place by the person Mark had trusted implicitly. The betrayal struck Mark with physical force, stealing his breath. He looked at Sarah, at the woman he had married, and saw a stranger. A cold, selfish person capable of profound cruelty. The love he thought he felt evaporated, replaced by a sickening mixture of grief and white-hot rage. "Get out," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Mark, please, get out of my sight. We're done." He didn't care where she went. He didn't care about the apartment, the shared bank account, which he later discovered she had completely drained, including the money set aside for Max, or the ridiculously short marriage. All he cared about was the searing emptiness where Max should have been. That night, Mark didn't sleep. He sat on Sarah's immaculate sofa, the silence of the apartment deafening, staring at the photos on his phone. Mark and Max on a hike. Max wearing a goofy birthday hat. Max asleep at his feet. Each image was a fresh stab of pain. He had failed his dog. He had trusted the wrong person. And Max had paid the price. The following weeks were a blur of heartbreak and desperate searching. Mark moved out of Sarah's apartment immediately, finding a small, temporary furnished place near the base. He started calling shelters, first locally, then expanding his radius. Cumberland County Animal Services, shelters in Raleigh, Greensboro, Charlotte, even crossing state lines into South Carolina and Virginia. He described Max meticulously: his age, now almost 4, his distinctive, slightly darker patch of fur over his left eye, his friendly but sometimes anxious nature in new environments. The microchip registered in Mark's name. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Each phone call ended in disappointment. Sorry, no golden retrievers matching that description. We haven't had him here. Dogs get adopted quickly, or sometimes... They never finished the sentence, but Mark knew the grim reality of overcrowded shelters. Hope began to dwindle, replaced by a dull, persistent ache. He put up flyers, posted on lost dog Facebook groups, visited local vets. Nothing. 6 months passed since his return. 6 months of agonizing silence. Mark functioned on autopilot. He went to work, he trained, he saw his army buddies. But the joy was gone, leached out of him by grief and guilt. The emptiness of his apartment echoed the emptiness in his chest. His friends urged him to move on, to consider getting another dog. Mark resisted initially. It felt like a betrayal of Max's memory, but the silence was becoming unbearable. Maybe, just maybe, giving another abandoned dog a loving home could help, heal some part of his fractured heart. It wouldn't replace Max, nothing ever could, but it would be something. So, one Saturday afternoon, Mark found himself driving to the county animal shelter, the one closest to Fayetteville, the one he'd called multiple times but hadn't visited, in person since those first frantic weeks. He walked down the long concrete corridor, the cacophony of barking and whining echoing around him. Dogs of all shapes and sizes peered out from behind chain-link fences, some hopeful, some fearful, some utterly resigned. He passed kennel after kennel, his heart heavy. A scruffy terrier mix, a boisterous pit bull, a shy shepherd hiding in the back of its run. He was almost at the end of the row, feeling defeated, ready to turn back, when he saw him. In the last kennel, curled up on a thin blanket, was a golden retriever. Thinner than Mark remembered, his coat dull and lacking its usual luster, but unmistakably, "Max?" Mark whispered, his voice catching in his throat. The dog's head lifted slowly. His ears perked. He stared at Mark, a flicker of confusion in his sad brown eyes. Mark moved closer to the kennel door, sinking to his knees. "Max? Buddy? Is that you?" The dog scrambled to his feet. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, his tail giving a tentative, hopeful wag. He sniffed at the chain link, whining softly. And then, recognition dawned. A switch flipped. The tentative wag exploded into a full-body wiggle. He pressed himself against the wire, whining, barking, licking frantically at the air where Mark's hands were. "Max! Oh my God! Max!" Tears streamed down Mark's face, hot and unrestrained. He fumbled with the latch, his hands shaking, but a shelter volunteer rushed over. "Can I help you?" "This is my dog," Mark choked out, pointing at the frantic golden retriever. "This is Max. He was stolen, abandoned, 6 months ago." The volunteer looked surprised, then cautious. "Do you have proof of ownership, sir?" "Yes." "Yes! Vet records, photos, he's microchipped. Please, just scan him." They led Max, who was now practically glued to Mark's side, trembling with excitement, to the intake office. The volunteer ran the microchip scanner over the dog's shoulder blades. Beep. She checked the number against the database. "Maximus Reynolds," she read aloud, looking at Mark's driver's license. "Registered to Mark Reynolds. Address listed near Fort Bragg." She looked from the screen to the tearful soldier hugging his long-lost dog. "He came in as a stray about 6 months ago. Found wandering near Highway 87, quite far out. No collar, no tags. We've had him listed for adoption for a while now." Mark hugged Max tighter. burying his face in the dog's fur, heedless of the smell or the matted patches. Max licked his face, his tail thumping a joyous rhythm against the floor. He was thinner, maybe 15 pounds lighter, and clearly stressed, but he was alive. He was home. The shelter waived the adoption fees, overjoyed at the reunion. Mark bundled Max into his car, promising the staff he'd be back with documentation and to potentially discuss the abandonment situation further. The first stop was the vet. Max got a thorough checkup. Underweight, mild dehydration, some anxiety, but thankfully no major health issues. The vet estimated the cost of getting him back to peak health, including supplements, improved diet, and follow-up checks, would be around $700. Mark paid without hesitation. Driving back to his apartment, with Max's head resting contentedly on the center console, Mark felt a sense of peace settle over him for the first time in months. But beneath the peace, a cold resolve hardened. Sarah wouldn't get away with this. The reunion with Max wasn't just an end to Mark's grief. It was the beginning of his quest for justice. Armed with the shelter's intake report, detailing Max's condition and date of arrival as a stray, the vet's assessment confirming neglect, and his own meticulously kept records proving ownership and prior care, Mark contacted a lawyer. The divorce was the easy part. Sarah, perhaps sensing the storm gathering, didn't contest it. The marriage was officially dissolved quickly, severing the legal tie that had enabled her betrayal. The animal cruelty charges were more complex, but Mark was determined. Animal abandonment is a crime in North Carolina. Mark, with his lawyer's guidance, filed a detailed report with Cumberland County Animal Control and the Sheriff's Department. He provided Sarah's name, her address, the timeline, the shelter records, the vet reports detailing Max's weight loss and condition consistent with neglect and abandonment, and copies of bank statements showing the funds specifically designated for Max's care that she had spent elsewhere. He even included screenshots of their vague text conversations during his deployment, where she lied about Max's whereabouts. The investigation took time. Animal control officers interviewed Mark, the shelter staff, and the veterinarian. They then paid Sarah a visit. Faced with the microchip evidence, the shelter records placing Max miles away shortly after Mark deployed, and the proof of her lies, Sarah's story crumbled completely. There was no friend with a farm. There was only calculated abandonment. Several weeks later, Mark received a call from the investigating officer. Charges were being filed against Sarah Jenkins, misdemeanor animal cruelty by abandonment and neglect. Mark felt a grim satisfaction, but no joy. Seeing Sarah arrested wasn't about vengeance in the traditional sense. It was about accountability. It was about ensuring she understood the gravity of abandoning a living creature who depended on her. A creature who had been entrusted to her care by her husband deployed overseas. It was about sending a message that animals are not disposable inconveniences. The legal proceedings dragged on for a few more months. Sarah eventually pleaded guilty to the abandonment charge to avoid a potentially harsher sentence on the neglect count. She received a fine, probation, community service, and, crucially, for Mark, a court order prohibiting her from owning any animals for 5 years. The fine was around $1,000, plus court costs. It felt insufficient for the pain caused, but it was something. It was a public record of her actions. Through it all, Mark focused on Max. Slowly, surely, Max regained his weight, his golden coat regaining its shine. The anxiety faded, replaced by his old goofy exuberance. He shadowed Mark everywhere, rarely letting him out of sight, as if afraid he might disappear again. Mark didn't mind. Their bond, tested and temporarily broken by betrayal, was now forged anew, stronger than ever. They moved into a slightly larger apartment, one with easy access to parks. Mark established their old routines, the early morning nose nudge, the adventurous walks, the evening couch cuddles. The apartment quickly filled with the comforting signs of Max's presence. The click of his nails on the floor, the happy thump of his tail, the scattered collection of durable chew toys, and yes, the ubiquitous golden fur that clung lovingly to everything Mark owned. Mark wouldn't have it any other way. He had his best friend back, safe and sound. The woman who had broken his heart and betrayed his trust was facing the consequences of her actions. A footnote in a chapter he was determined to close. The future was uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear. Wherever Mark Reynolds went, Maximus, his loyal, loving, resilient golden retriever, would be right there beside him.